Why was the wind the only thing speaking to her that morning? She lay flat against the cold ridge, cheek pressed to the stock of her rifle, eye aligned with the scope, but her mind was somewhere deeper, far behind the mountain, buried under memories she never asked to carry. The valley below was quiet in that nervous kind of way when the earth itself feels like it's holding its breath. The calms in her ear crackled, but no one spoke to her directly. They rarely did any more. Not because they doubted her aim, no, they feared it. They feared what silence had made of her. She adjusted her breathing, slow and disciplined. Frost crawled along the edges of her glove as the wind cut past the rocks and kissed the metal of her barrel. Her call sign was Ash, but no one knew her by that name outside the wire. To them, she was the phantom on Overwatch, the unseen variable that turned impossible missions into survivable ones. But up here alone, with the scope greeting the distant roofs of a crumbling village, she was just a woman with a heartbeat she sometimes wished she could silence. A voice finally bled into her earpiece, hushed, male, familiar. Overwatch, report status. She didn't answer right away. That had become her habit, not out of defiance, but because words had weight and she refused to waste any. The target compound was exactly where intelligence said it would be: old stone, patched tin, smoke faintly curling from what passed for a chimney. 3 structures, 1 truck, no visible guards. But she saw movement through cracks, shadows bending and shifting with purpose. The mission briefing had called it a relay hub for weapons transport, but no one had mentioned children in the area. She could see them sometimes, ghost-like, moving between walls. Still waiting, the voice insisted, though softer now. He respected her even if he didn't understand her. Most of them didn't. She finally spoke just 2 words: I see. They wouldn't press. She was trusted but not embraced. She had been different ever since Coast Province, ever since the night no one debriefed properly and everyone pretended moving forward was healing. Her silence after that had been her only rebellion. Rumors followed her like stray dogs. Some said she'd snapped. Others said she'd seen something no human being should have to hold in their mind. The truth was quieter, more complicated, and heavier than any of them could guess. She shifted the rifle slightly. Her right shoulder ached where an old fracture still lingered under the tissue, a reminder of a fall off a cliffside extraction point 2 years ago. She never complained. Pain was just archived sensation. She had learned to file it away like bad orders and sleepless nights. Below, dust stirred. A door opened. A man stepped into the bluish daylight, wrapped in a coat too thin for the mountain cold. He looked tired but not dangerous. Not yet. Ash didn't blink, but something in her chest pressed harder against bone. Her finger brushed the trigger guard without intention. Minutes passed. Patrol units were advancing from the south side of the village, moving slow through the ravine. Their boots wouldn't be heard up here, but she could feel them, as if the ground told her when someone came with intent. Command wanted eyes on the approach routes, early threat detection. They trusted her to eliminate obstacles before they had time to breathe. But no one had asked her the question she kept asking herself. How many pieces of herself could she sacrifice before nothing remained but the rifle and the orders? A memory flickered like static, her younger brother showing her how to balance stones in the creek behind their childhood house, stacking each one carefully, whispering about patience. He'd enlisted before she did. He never made it home. They told her he died bravely, and she'd believed them until she found the classified after-action report 6 months later. Friendly fire, miscommunication, a name scrubbed from responsibility. They called it a tragedy. She called it theft. That was why she took sniper school. That was why she volunteered for Overwatch missions in the most remote deployments. Distance made lies harder to swallow. Through a scope, everything was naked, honest, unforgiving. No one could edit reality. Her comms hissed again. Ash Patrol is 40 meters from first checkpoint. Any visual anomalies? She repositioned her scope slightly, tracking a weaving line of telephone wires that led to a structure behind the main compound. A glint, barely there, maybe sunlight on glass, clicked at the corner of her sightline. She spoke low, calm. Possible optic west of the well. Second building. They trusted her eyes even when they doubted her silence. The spotter on ground shifted formation. She could see their helmets now, little black dots with breath fog rising. Her rifle was custom-fitted, skeletonized stock, extended bipod, a suppressor that whistled faintly when the wind angled right. There were notches carved into the interior grip, tiny lines invisible unless one knew to look. They weren't kills. They were promises, one for each letter in her brother's name. A second figure emerged from the building, then a third. These ones carried crates, no visible weapons. She tracked the glint again, a scope, a lens, or just junk glass hung from a nail. She couldn't be certain yet. Confirmed threat, the same voice, gently impatient. She narrowed her eye, adjusting focus. A curtain flicked in a side window and vanished. She didn't like it. Something in her gut, the same instinct that had saved lives in Kandahar and cost lives in Helmand, stiffened. "Not yet," she said. Her spotter in command would be uneasy with that answer. Command liked binaries, shoot or don't, threat or not. Ash lived in the space between. That space was where truth actually lived, where hesitation could either save the innocent or doom the mission. The trick was knowing which it would be without the luxury of time. The wind dropped. For a moment there was no sound at all, no breath in her ear, no movement in the valley. Even the truck's exhaust smoke seemed to pause midair. She hated that kind of silence. It never came without consequence. Then a child appeared. Small, maybe 6, wrapped in a blanket that dragged over the ground, stepping uncertainly from behind the outer wall. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He just stood, looking at the approaching patrol with the kind of eyes that had seen gunfire before they'd seen a birthday cake. Ash exhaled, barely a sound. The men with crates froze when they noticed him. One of them crouched, speaking softly. The child didn't flinch. She remembered something her mother once said after her brother died. Grief doesn't age the body, it ages the eyes. She hadn't understood at the time. Now she did. Another crackle. Ash, we're locking positions. Do we proceed? Her finger moved inside the guard now, settling near the trigger. She didn't intend to shoot, but readiness was reflex. Targets could bloom from nothing in seconds. She scanned the rooftops again. Nothing. Then a flash of light, not where she expected. South roof, the far side of the compound, barely a speck angled too shallow for a weapon scope, but it moved. Movement rooftop, building 3, she murmured. Confirm weapon. Unclear. Rules of engagement stand. You call it. She hated that phrase. You call it. As if consequences didn't brand themselves onto the soul of whoever pulled the trigger. As if leadership could wash their hands with delegation. The child looked up at the sky suddenly, like he heard something she didn't. His lips moved. A prayer, a warning. Ash checked wind speed. Distance, 721 meters. Angle, 12 degrees down. She could hit a knife blade at that range if she wanted, but she didn't know what the figure on the roof held. She found herself asking the same question she always did in these moments. Would her brother want her to protect strangers the way no one had protected him? Or would he tell her survival meant choosing her own over everything else? The patrol halted as if the earth itself had drawn a line. Someone lifted a hand in signal. Ash tracked the rooftop figure again. They knelt now, disappearing behind a short wall. What unsettled her wasn't the threat. It was the absence of certainty. Behind her in memory, a different mountain, a different mission, a different silence. She had made a call then. She'd fired and they'd congratulated her. But they'd never learned who else had been in that room. Neither had she. The blast had erased the answer. A radio click snapped her back. Another voice, this time female, stern. Command needs confirmation. Is Overwatch green light to engage if required? Ash swallowed, her throat dry. The child had stepped back behind the wall now, following the man with crates. The rooftop remained empty. Wind shifted slightly, brushing her cheek. Negative engage, she said. Hold positions 3 minutes. 3 minutes was an eternity for ground units, but no one argued. She adjusted her view-widening scope to capture peripheral movement. A stray dog trotted between buildings, ribcage sharp under its fur. Laundry flapped on a distant line, men's shirts, women's scarves, something floral. The world below wasn't a battlefield. It was a place violence happened to land. A small click of static came through. Someone whispered too far from Mike. Then, "Ash, this is Captain Draymond. Patrol is exposed. We need your eyes open." She didn't respond. Her eyes were always open. Sleep had become optional long ago. Nights blended. Thoughts bled into dreams and back into thoughts. She had forgotten what it felt like to rest without weapon oil under her fingernails. She marked 3 potential vantage points for hidden shooters, then scanned them again. Nothing. That didn't relax her. The most lethal threats were the ones that looked like broken roofs and empty windows. Someone on the team below said something she couldn't hear. Laughter, maybe, or fear disguised as banter. Soldiers always did that when the air got too thick. She thought of the title command had given this operation, Silent Ember. They liked poetic code names for things that would end in classified paperwork and quiet funerals. She wondered who picked them. Maybe someone back at headquarters who drank coffee from clean cups and never saw how blood looked in ice. Her back muscles tightened. A cramp formed under her shoulder blade. She ignored it. A new shape emerged near the truck, taller, moving with intention. A rifle slung low across his back. He spoke to someone inside the doorway and gestured to the road. Ash stilled. That movement too direct, too casual, it meant awareness. Someone knew they were being watched. She whispered more to herself than to the team. Something's off. No one answered. They didn't have to. A gust of wind rattled the sparse, dry brush near her boots. She caught the scent of iron in the air. Not blood, but the mountain minerals loosened by frost. She remembered her first deployment, barely 20, wearing gear too big and hope too loud. She used to write letters home even when no one answered them. She didn't write anymore. The last one she tried to send sat unfinished in a locker in Kandahar. She couldn't remember what she'd wanted to say. The tall figure pointed toward the ravine. 2 more men stepped out, armed. They didn't raise their weapons yet, but they moved with that posture that came right before choices hardened. She aligned her crosshairs on the rifle strap of the first man. She could disable without killing if she needed to. But that wasn't always the mercy people thought. Wounds turned into stories, and stories turned into vengeance. The captain's voice broke in again, more urgent. "Ash, if they lift arms." "I know," she said. The rooftop glint appeared once more, quick and sharp. A mirrored signal, a scope, or sunlight catching a shard of glass in the wrong moment, doubt carved along her nerves. She tasted copper, an old habit. She bit her tongue when tension coiled. Her finger found the trigger, not pressing, just resting. Time thickened. Somewhere behind the compound, a door slammed, and 100 unseen choices rearranged themselves like chess pieces. She waited. She always waited, just a second longer than they expected. Because there was something she hadn't told any of them yet. Not about the night in Coast. Not about the last transmission from her brother. Not about the promise she'd carved into the grip of her rifle the day she stopped speaking freely. Not yet. And whether they knew it or not, everything that would follow hinged on that silence. The moment the door slammed behind the compound, the valley changed. It wasn't louder, it wasn't obvious, but the silence carried a new weight, as if the air itself tightened around every stone and shadow. Ash felt it first in her chest, then in her grip on the rifle. Something had shifted inside those walls, something deliberate. She knew that rhythm. She had lived with it in other missions, in other countries where dust swallowed entire villages overnight. The kind of rhythm that meant the unseen pieces had started moving. Her comms hissed with overlapping voices. Ground units muttered, uncertain, trying to decipher orders that hadn't yet been given. Someone's breathing came through heavier than it should. She cut all of it out, narrowing her mind to the pattern of windows, the rhythm of doors, the way shadows lingered too long on the far wall. Patterns told truth long before men did. The tall man with the slung rifle stepped closer to the road. His stance wasn't careless anymore. His head tilted, listening, he knew. Ash's crosshairs followed him but didn't settle. She didn't trust what was too easy. The rooftop glint came again, sharper now like a blade testing light. It was angled intentionally. That wasn't sunlight. That was communication. Overwatch, the captain's voice pressed harder now. Confirm hostile intent. My men are exposed. Ash whispered into her mic, so low it barely registered. They're stalling. Stalling for what? Her silence was its own answer. Through the scope she caught another flicker, this time not on the roof but at ground level. A shadow sliding along the side of the compound wall, vanishing behind stacked crates. Then another. Not villagers, not children. Trained movement, deliberate. The rifle-strapped man was only a decoy. She exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. The child she'd seen earlier had disappeared. That fact sat heavier than anything else. Children didn't just vanish without direction. Someone had pulled him away, tucked him out of sight, which meant whatever was about to happen, the locals had been warned. Ambush, Ash said flatly. Her words cracked through the comms like a flare. Boots scrambled. The patrol flattened against rock edges, rifles angling. Orders barked. The valley woke up with fear. Then the first shot came not from her but from the compound. A crack ricocheted through the mountainside. Stone near the lead soldier's helmet shattered into dust. Screams followed, boots crunching as they scrambled for cover. Ash's scope snapped to the rooftop. There he was, the shooter. His weapon wasn't heavy, just an old marksman rifle, but deadly enough from elevation. He chambered again, but he never got the shot off. Ash's trigger broke the silence, and his head dropped like a stone behind the wall. Her breath steadied. One shot, just one. But she didn't pause to feel anything, because more were coming. From the compound side doors, 3 armed men poured out, weapons already raised. Ash tracked the first, squeezed, his shoulder detonated, red rifle falling. The second ducked behind the truck, sparks flying as bullets chewed metal. The third sprinted toward the ravine where the patrol had scattered. He almost made it before Ash's round caught his thigh, spinning him into the dirt. Contacts confirmed, multiple hostiles. The captain roared, but his men already knew. Fire lit the valley, rifles barking in controlled bursts, echoing like thunder off stone. Ash shifted positions on her ridge, swinging her barrel across to cover the south side. She knew better than to linger in one lane. Counter-snipers learned habits. Her eyes swept rooftops again, every glint a possible scope, every shadow a barrel. Then came the sound she hated most, a rocket's hiss. It launched from the compound, arcing low, aimed not at her but at the patrol. She had seconds. Her scope snapped to it mid-flight. No chance of interception. She held her breath anyway, watching helplessly as it struck the rocks near their cover. The explosion tore the valley apart. Dust swallowed everything. She heard coughing, screaming, voices lost in static. Her gut clenched. She wanted to speak, to ask who was alive, who was hurt, but she kept her voice locked. If she asked, she'd carry every answer. She couldn't afford more ghosts. Instead, she scanned the smoke. Shadows moved through it, enemies advancing, thinking they'd broken the patrol's line. One emerged clear enough. She put him down. Another followed, crouching low, firing wildly. Another shot. He dropped. She didn't count kills. She counted seconds. Seconds given back to her team. Overwatch, we need cover fire now. The captain's voice cracked with grit. Already doing it, she thought, but didn't say. The smoke thinned slightly. 2 of the soldiers below dragged a wounded man by his vest, blood trailing dark across stone. His leg was gone beneath the knee. Ash's scope twitched. For half a second, the memory of her brother came back, men dragging him, only she hadn't been there to see. She blinked it away, forcing herself back to the valley. The truck near the compound roared to life suddenly. Not retreat, movement. Its back was weighed heavy with crates. They were trying to move supplies out in the chaos. A driver leaned forward, slamming the gear. Her rifle shifted quick, crosshairs centered. One squeeze, one crack. The windshield bloomed red and the truck veered, slamming into the stone wall, smoke coughing from its hood. Someone shouted orders in a language she understood but never admitted knowing. She caught fragments, hold them, delay, time. Time for what? The rooftop where she'd killed the sniper was empty now, too empty. Her gut churned again. Then she realized none of them were truly pressing the attack. Their fire was aggressive, yes, but sloppy, almost calculated to hold distance rather than close it. They weren't trying to kill everyone here. They were trying to keep them here. Her stomach dropped. "It's a trap," she whispered. "This isn't the main force." No one answered right away. Then the captain barked back, "Repeat." But before she could, the valley itself gave her the answer. From the far ridge opposite her overwatch position, new figures rose. Half a dozen at least, maybe more, their silhouettes crisp against the morning sky. They had elevation, angle, everything. And worst of all, they had waited until now, when dust blinded and chaos broke cohesion. Counter-snipers, flanking team. Ash froze, every nerve alert. She had minutes, maybe seconds, before they zeroed her ridge. Her scope snapped to them. The first lifted his rifle. Too far to fire accurately yet, but he would have time. She held her breath, tracking his chest. One shot. He crumpled backward, rolling down rock. The rest scattered, taking cover. Smart, experienced. She shifted quickly, rolling her body a meter left along the ridge to change her angle. A bullet cracked stone where her head had just been. Chips stung her cheek. She ignored it. The patrol below was shouting now, caught between compound fire and New Ridge fire. They didn't have eyes on both. Only she did. Ash breathed through clenched teeth. This was the nightmare scenario. Split threats, limited time. Every second she chose one side meant the other bled. And in that terrible stillness, another memory rose uninvited. Her brother's voice on their last call, scratchy through static. "Promise me something. Don't let silence eat you alive." She hadn't answered then. She still hadn't. Her finger steadied. She fired again. Another enemy dropped. She shifted, fired again, missed. The rock burst beside her target, who vanished. A bullet screamed past her ear, so close the air split with heat. She bit down a curse, rolled again. Her shoulder throbbed where old pain lived. Below, another scream. A soldier down, she couldn't see who. Her comms filled with overlapping chaos now, but she filtered it out. Noise was a distraction. The world narrowed to sightlines, angles, breath. She marked 2 more enemies on the far ridge. If she didn't drop them in the next 30 seconds, her position would be compromised. If she moved, she'd lose cover and line of sight. Every choice was wrong. She settled crosshairs again, lips parting just enough for breath. Then she stopped. Because something in her periphery froze her blood. From the compound side door, dragged forward by one of the armed men, came the small child she had seen earlier. Blanket trailing, feet stumbling, eyes wide. A weapon pressed to his back. Not a shield, a message. And in that instant, everything Ash thought she knew about this mission shattered. The child's feet dragged across the dirt, small toes barely keeping pace with the man clutching the back of his collar. Dust clung to the boy's blanket, the frayed edges sweeping the ground like a surrender flag no one intended to honor. Ash's finger froze against the trigger. The breath she had been holding slipped from her lungs in silence, not relief, recognition. Not of the boy, but of the tactic. This wasn't desperation. It was control, calculated, weaponized humanity. The man holding the child didn't shout threats or raise his rifle. He didn't need theatrics. He simply angled the boy toward the patrol's direction, the message wordless but deafening. One move, one shot, and innocence would pay the price. Through the calm, someone hissed, "They've got a hostage, Jesus." "Hold fire," the captain ordered, but panic crept into his voice like a fracture under ice. Ash didn't blink. Her scope followed every twitch of the child's movements, every shift in the captor's weight. The man's stance wasn't sloppy. He held the boy with one arm, rifle in the other, muzzle relaxed but ready. His eyes kept flicking toward the patrol, toward the truck, toward the mountain ridge where her own position lay hidden. He was stalling again, gaining seconds, but for what? Another gunshot cracked from the far ridge, one of the counter-snipers she hadn't dropped yet. The round struck stone inches from one of the wounded soldiers below. Screams erupted. Dust leapt. Her jaw tightened. She could eliminate the hostage-taker with a single shot, but not without risking passing through and striking the child. Angle wrong, distance too thin. She'd killed men through car doors, shot hands off rifles, clipped kneecaps in blizzards. But a child pressed against a chest was a different equation. No margin. No forgiveness if wrong. And then she heard it, breathing. Not hers, not the captain. Someone on comms was trembling, mic open, fear leaking into every gasp. "Don't shoot, don't, he's just a kid." Ash shut her eyes for half a second, just long enough to erase the voices. When she opened them, the world narrowed again to crosshairs and math. Another figure emerged from the compound, older, bearded, wearing a coat stitched with two different fabrics. He wasn't holding a weapon. His hands were lifted, palms open. He approached the child-taker slowly, speaking in a tone too low to catch through the wind. Not pleading, coordinating. That confirmed it. This wasn't chaos. It was orchestration. The ridge across from her cracked again, enemy fire missing her by less than a breath. Pebbles stung her cheek, slicing skin. Warmth trickled, but she didn't flinch. Two enemies remained up there. Maybe three. If they landed one good hit, she'd be gone before anyone below even noticed. But if she shifted focus to the ridge, the child would be moved deeper into the compound, and then she'd lose him. Lose the chance to end this without bodies too small for body bags. She remembered snow once, coast again. How a little girl had wandered into the line of fire, barefoot, clutching a tin cup. They told Ash afterward she'd made the right call holding fire. But the girl's face never left. It sat in the silent folds of memory, breathing with the same steadiness as the wind. Below, the patrol regrouped behind shattered stone. Someone was bleeding out, their cries thinning into wet gurgles. One medic tried to reach him, but fire from the ridge kept slicing the air too close. Nobody could run, nobody could retreat, and nobody could advance while a child stood between them and the enemy's will. Ash finally spoke, voice low enough to feel carved in stone. "I need 60 seconds. The captain answered, "You don't have 60. You do now." There was something in her tone that shut every other voice up. Not command, not request, a statement. And the kind of soldiers who'd seen enough didn't argue with a tone like that. She rolled back from the rifle, shifting her weight from her stomach to her knees, crawling 3 meters along the ridge without lifting her silhouette against the horizon. Bullets carved the rock where her head had been. She kept going, faster, breathing shallow to silence her gear. She mapped 3 alternate angles earlier, but none perfect. She didn't need perfect. She needed possible. The child looked up then, not at the man holding him, but at the sky above the ridge where she hid. His eyes weren't wet. They were empty in that ancient way war taught the young to survive. He didn't cry. He didn't breathe hard. He had already learned the world didn't stop for fear. Ash knew that look. She'd seen it in a mirror once. Her boot found a foothold between 2 stones, and she angled low again, rifle sliding in front of her like an extension of bone. Scope up. Breath held. She scanned the far ridge first, one target exposed for half a heartbeat. Squeezed down, the other ducked. He'd relocate within 20 seconds. She had less. Her scope slid back to the compound. The older man was now speaking to the captor, his hand resting gently on the child's shoulder as if soothing him. But Ash saw his other hand, twitching twice in a coded pattern before tapping the boy's back. Not comfort. Signal. Her heart stopped moving fear. It started moving calculation. He wasn't keeping the child safe. He was using him to direct something unseen. Ash's eyes shifted, past the captor, past the boy, to the far corner of the compound where crates had been stacked. A tarp hung loose over one side. Under it, movement. She adjusted the scope. 3 more men, loading something into a narrow hatch in the ground. They were buying time to move whatever was buried there. Weapons, tech, or worse, hostages not yet revealed. She didn't have minutes, she had breaths. Her finger brushed the trigger again. The child's head dipped, then tilted slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. And in that single second, Ash made a decision no briefing could have predicted. She didn't warn them, couldn't. Words would slow her hands, and hesitation was a luxury she'd buried years ago. Ash angled her rifle a fraction to the left, aligning not with the man holding the boy, but with a strip of ground 1/2 meter from his heel. One shot. The round struck dirt with a force that kicked dust into their faces. The child flinched back, instinct overriding command. For the blink of an eye, space opened between small ribs and the man's torso. She didn't waste it. Second shot. Clean, precise. The captor dropped before his reflexes even understood the betrayal of physics. His hand slid from the child's collar, limp body folding backward with a dull thud. The compound reacted late. Shock always bought her seconds. But the older man moved first, shouting something guttural, his hand on the boy's back again, not protective now, but steering him toward the hatch where the others hid. No. Ash fired at the ground near them again, forcing the older man to duck and pull the child behind him. He didn't run toward the crates this time. He turned the boy toward the building wall, hands up as if to shield him from the unseen scope. Patrol below surged. Soldiers broke cover, 2 rushing to drag the wounded out of the line of fire, 1 laying suppressive rounds at the ridgeline where the last sniper remained. Their fear hadn't vanished, but it had somewhere to go now. Orders returned to lungs. Ash shifted her focus to the ridge again. She watched for the telltale glint of glass, the stuttering panic of a man who knows he's suddenly alone. There, 2 rocks down from the previous muzzle flash. The angle was off, range farther, wind tunneling through the valley almost sideways. She compensated by feel, not formula. The shot landed with a muffled crack, and everything on that ridge went still for the first time since the ambush began. But the real storm wasn't bullets. It was below. The older man's posture was changing, no longer submissive, no longer cautious. His hand slid into his coat, pulling a small device the size of a matchbox. Not a detonator too small, something else. Ash whispered into comms, left of the child, thin coat, something in his hand. The captain responded instantly this time. "We see him. Orders." Her silence was the order. She watched his thumb move across the device. A press, then a pause, then another press. Whatever he was signaling, it wasn't for show. She aimed lower, not to kill, to disable. The shot bit into his wrist. The device flew from his hand, bouncing into the dust. He screamed but stayed on his feet, shoving the boy behind his legs again. Blood dripped, but his eyes were defiant, not broken. The boy didn't cry. He stared at the device on the ground as if something inside him recognized it. Then the horizon shifted. At first it was only sound, rotors distant but closing, not military, smaller, civilian or modified. Ash's gut turned. Evac or reinforcements. She scanned the sky through partial glare. A speck crested the far ridge, weaving low between rocky outcrops. Her heartbeat slowed the way it always did when chaos layered itself too thin to read at a glance. She zoomed further. The chopper's doors weren't marked. No flag, no registration, tail modified. Extraction for them. The captain cursed under his breath, barely muted on comms. If that takes off with whatever they're pulling from the hatch. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The war didn't always arrive in convoys or uniforms. Sometimes it came in unmarked metal and silence. Ash moved again, crawling back 3 meters to adjust her angle. Her muscles screamed, but she'd trained the pain to whisper. She aligned the rifle toward the crates, magnifying the hatch. One of the men below surfaced briefly, lifting a black case with both hands, large enough to need 2 people to carry if weight matched size. Another climbed out behind him, scanning the horizon wildly. They were running out of time. Her vision tunneled, and memory unspooled with it. A hotel hallway, her sister's voice whispering from behind a locked door, the static of a phone she couldn't answer because 2 men were already inside, the sound of breaking glass, then silence that never healed. War wasn't always overseas. Some of it lived under your skin. She inhaled through her teeth and spoke once more, measured and cold. "Take ground now." The patrol obeyed without argument. 4 soldiers broke from cover, fanning across the open dirt as gunfire cracked from the compound walls. The medic hauled the wounded back behind a wall. Someone shouted for smoke. Someone else screamed a warning. The air turned thick with dust and intent. The boy stumbled as the older man pulled him toward the crates again, using him like a shield the way some men used walls. Ash tracked his leg, lining the shot across tendon instead of bone. She fired. The man collapsed, knee buckling, the child yanked down with him. The boy hit the dirt hard but scrambled upright, eyes searching, not for safety, but for something he'd been told to follow. Ash saw it then, the briefest tremor in his hands, not panic, conditioning. He'd been taught to move when told, not to feel. Wind dropped for half a second, and in that breath she heard the chopper louder now. Maybe 90 seconds out, maybe less. She didn't speak to command, didn't wait for permission. Her rifle swung to the hatch again, this time aiming not for the men carrying cases, but at the hinge of the hatch door itself. One shot shattered the metal brace. The door slipped from its slot and slammed shut with the force of its own weight, nearly trapping the man climbing out. He screamed something, his voice turning shrill before being drowned in gunfire from the patrol closing in. The boy started to run, not to the soldiers, not to the compound, but toward the fallen device in the dirt. Ash's stomach clenched. She couldn't risk what might be triggered. She fired again, this time inches ahead of his toes, blasting dust into his face. He froze, dropping to his knees, covering his ears though no sound touched him now. The older man, bleeding and pinned to the dirt by his ruined leg, reached for the boy, not with comfort, but with command. Ash wished, briefly, she could turn her rifle on memory instead of flesh. The patrol reached the outer walls of the compound. Shouts rose. Grenades detonated with muffled concussions against mudbrick. Smoke poured. The chopper crested the ridge fully now, 50 feet up and dropping fast. Its side door slid open mid-descent, a rope already kicked out. Ash aimed at the rotor housing, but the angle was too steep, the distance stretching luck to stupidity. She needed the chopper lower, needed them confident enough to dip. They were. It angled down, nose tipping as the rope steadied. A man inside barked orders in a language she didn't need to understand to translate. Hurry. Ash exhaled, long and even, and took the shot. The round punched into the side panel near the intake shaft. Smoke belched. The engine coughed. The pilot jerked the nose up in reflex, and the chopper lurched sideways, tail clipping the ridge edge. Metal screeched. The rotor stuttered, coughing sparks. The men below dove for cover, abandoning the hatch and sprinting instead for the building's inner rooms. The chopper didn't crash, not fully, but it spun, listing, fighting gravity like a drunk stumbling off a curb. It clipped the ground 50 meters from the compound, skidding into rock and throwing dust a story high. Silence followed, but not peace. Ash blinked slowly. Her cheek still bled. Her breath stayed low. She didn't smile, not for falls, not for near victories. Her eyes went back to the boy. He knelt in the dirt, eyes fixed not on the wreckage, nor the soldiers, nor the man who'd used him, but on the small device lying half-buried where her bullet had kicked it. And for the first time since this started, she saw something surface in his expression. Not fear, not numbness, recognition, as if he knew that whatever war he'd been dragged into wasn't over. Not for him, not for her, not for anyone still breathing in its shadow. Ash stayed low behind the ridge, the wind stilling as if the mountain itself were holding its breath, weighing every heartbeat. Dust hung in the air, sharp in the nostrils, clinging to sweat on her forehead. The boy remained kneeling in the dirt, eyes locked on the device she had disabled, fingers twitching as if it were some arcane relic capable of rewriting fate. She couldn't move. She didn't dare. One wrong motion, one poorly judged blink, and the aftermath of today's battle would multiply, carving new scars into those who had already survived miracles. The patrol below regrouped cautiously, dragging the wounded behind the sparse cover of collapsed stone walls. Their whispers carried to her ears, low and ragged. Each breath she caught seemed amplified, a reminder of the cost, the fragility of life in this valley carved from rock and war. Ash exhaled slowly, counting her heartbeats, the only rhythm that felt honest in the chaos around her. She thought of the last time she'd been this exposed, this alone. Helmand, the night the mortar strike hadn't ended and she'd crawled along ruined rooftops, one man alive under her protection while the rest had fallen silent. The memory wasn't shameful, it was a compass, and she followed it now, calibrating every thought to survival and protection. The boy stirred, glancing over his shoulder at the hatch at the smoldering chopper. Smoke curled lazily, black ribbons twisting into the pale daylight. The man who'd used him as leverage wasn't moving anymore, pinned partially beneath debris from the angle of the ridge Ash had shot through. His groans filled her ears, distant, hollow, the sounds of authority finally faltering against a calculated hand. "Stay down," she whispered under her breath, though the boy likely didn't hear. He had learned by now that stillness was the only language worth understanding in these moments. From the remaining structure, she saw movement, shadows flitting between gaps in the walls, carrying crates, dragging what could be ammunition, weapons, or something far worse. Her scope caught glimmers of polished metal, a flash of light that spoke of optics or explosives. She adjusted, finger brushing the trigger without settling, ready to interrupt but unwilling to risk the child. Her comm crackled, hesitant. The captain's voice carried the weight of men who had seen too much. "Ash, situation." "Compromised," she muttered, short, brutal, enough to warn, not enough to comfort. "Hatch secured, target device neutralized, but they're not finished." Static whispered back for a moment before he responded. "Hold position, cover our withdrawal." Withdrawal. Ash let the word sink into her chest. Retreat wasn't surrender, it was preservation. But every soldier she had trained, every order she had followed had led to this edge of calculation. And yet, the boy remained, fragile, a living proof of stakes beyond strategy. The wind picked up, rustling through the jagged rocks like whispers of something larger, something hidden. Ash's mind drifted briefly to her brother. The way he had taught her balance, how he would point at stones in a creek and speak of patience. "Every action leaves a mark," he had said, and she had learned it the hard way. Movement below caught her attention. Two of the patrol soldiers emerged from cover, dragging another wounded. They staggered, cautious, aware that even a second's distraction could be lethal. One glanced upward, spotting her in the ridge. Recognition flickered across his face, a mixture of awe and relief. Ash simply nodded slightly, a ghost of acknowledgement. Her eyes returned to the boy. He was standing now, tentative, hands brushing dust from his knees. For a heartbeat their eyes met. No words passed. None were necessary. In that gaze a pact formed. She would protect him until the moment's survival allowed, and he would follow instinct rather than instruction. A sudden noise, metal scraping, brought her focus back. From behind the compound's collapsed wall, another figure emerged, dragging something small and heavy. The crates had been abandoned for the moment. This individual carried what looked like a black box, the kind of device designed to hold secrets, to trigger consequences, to rewrite chaos in miniature. Ash's pulse quickened. She angled her rifle, mind calculating trajectory, distance, angle, wind, all in a fraction of a second. The device was critical, dangerous, and likely a priority for extraction. But there was the boy, risked directly in her line of fire. Precision would be measured in millimeters and patience. Her eye followed the line of movement. If she waited, if she timed the shot, she could neutralize the carrier without endangering the child. But if miscalculated... Another memory flashed, sharper than any prior, cutting through the adrenaline. Kandahar, the night of the ambush when she had hesitated for just a moment. The soldier beside her hadn't survived that half-second. She carried that failure every day, a shadow in her chest, a constant reminder that hesitation could be lethal. No hesitation now. Her finger squeezed. Dust erupted near the feet of the carrier. The figure twisted, startled, losing grip, stumbling back into the ruin. The device skidded across the dirt, clattering harmlessly. Ash exhaled slowly, muscles loosening. One problem neutralized without casualty. The boy ran forward, hands brushing the device toward safety. Ash kept the scope on him until he was out of direct line of fire, breathing slowly, moving with controlled instinct. The patrol below surged toward the compound now, suppressing fire against the remaining threat. Gunfire cracked, metal rang, voices shouted. Chaos unfolded in orchestrated bursts. Ash allowed herself a single movement. She shifted along the ridge, repositioning to cover the patrol's advance. She was not part of the push, but she was their unseen guide, their advantage in an uneven fight. From the far ridge, a fresh set of shadows approached, reinforcements for the enemy, masked by rock and cover. Ash adjusted the scope, marking them silently, calculating the sequence of engagement necessary to delay them until the patrol could clear the compound. Every second stretched into eternity. Her back muscles burned. Her cheek still stung from earlier shards. Her breathing was measured, controlled, as she had trained for years. The boy remained crouched near the device, safe, for now, but unaware of the calculations balancing on the precipice of survival around him. The chopper, damaged but intact, had landed beyond the compound, likely for extraction of someone she hadn't yet identified. Ash tracked its movement, nodding the pilot's corrections and the rotor's falter. It was alive, functional, but vulnerable. Movement below, enemy soldiers attempting to retrieve scattered supplies, brought her attention back to the valley. One by one, she dispatched targets with controlled precision, aiming not for death where avoidable but for disruption. Every miss, every near shot was deliberate, designed to buy the patrol fractions of seconds, to shift their momentum, to protect the child. Then silence. The only sound, the wind rushing past the ridge, carrying with it the scent of dirt, sweat, and dust. The immediate threat paused, regrouping, reassessing. Ash allowed herself the smallest exhale. The boy stood again, cautiously approaching one of the soldiers. Recognition, finally, passed through his gaze. No words, just the silent acknowledgement of survival, of protection, of something larger than fear. Ash lowered her rifle slightly, the first time in hours. She had made choices today she couldn't yet process. She had acted, moved, and restrained all at once, balancing life against consequence, instinct against morality. The patrol cleared the compound eventually, pulling wounded toward safety. Ash observed from the ridge until every soldier and the child were behind cover, away from immediate threat. Finally, she allowed herself a slow blink. The sun had shifted across the valley. Shadows were longer now. Dust still hung thick, but movement had slowed. The first moments of calm since the ambush settled across the rocky landscape. She exhaled fully, a long, controlled release. Not relief, not triumph, just acknowledgement of continuation. Survival didn't feel victorious, it felt expected. And the boy, kneeling now near the device she had neutralized, brushed dirt from his hands and looked toward her again. No fear, no gratitude, just recognition. Ash allowed herself to nod, a subtle gesture. Sometimes acknowledgement was enough. From the ridge, she scanned the horizon once more. The mountain held its silence, the valley its dust, and somewhere in the distance, wind carried both the echoes of gunfire and the whispers of what had been preserved. She crouched low, breathing through the ache in her back and shoulders, knowing the next move, extraction, regroup, recovery would come soon. And in that moment, amidst dust, echoes, and smoke, she realized that sometimes survival wasn't about action at all. Sometimes survival was measured in patience, in restraint, in the careful management of life around you. The patrol and the child moved toward the damaged chopper, guided by shouts, gestures, instinct. Ash remained behind, observing, calculating. One shot remained on her mind, one variable unresolved. But she had waited, weighed, and chosen. That was all the power she had right now. And sometimes dignity didn't speak, it simply acted. The valley breathed differently now, quieter but not peaceful. Ash's muscles ached from hours of tension, from crawling, pivoting, calculating every heartbeat against danger, against consequence. The boy followed the patrol slowly, cautious, as if each step carried unseen weight. Ash kept her scope trained on him, not to threaten, but to guide, to ensure he didn't slip into harm's way. The chopper's rotors groaned under load, still damaged, spinning unevenly, carrying not just soldiers but the fragile hope that extraction could mean life continued beyond this chaos. The pilot's skill was evident, every tilt and rotation calculated, precise. Ash admired it quietly, the way calm controlled a machine in the middle of potential disaster. She knew that discipline, lived that discipline. From her vantage, she could see the remnants of the enemy, men regrouping behind debris, nursing wounds, muttering in a language she didn't need to know. Instinct was universal, intent carried in every twitch, every gesture, every recoil of a weapon held too long. She marked them all, mentally, ready to act if they threatened the patrol or the child. Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to her own history. She had been trained for this, yes, but trained for what? To kill, to protect, to survive. Every mission brought the same paradox. You preserved life by risking it, sometimes multiple lives, sometimes innocence itself. Her own innocence had long since been exchanged for experience, for the quiet understanding of what must be done in silence, away from applause, away from recognition. Below, one soldier slipped, tripping over rubble, groaning in pain. Another turned, shielding him, guns raised, eyes wide, scanning for movement. The boy hesitated, unsure whether to run, stay, or kneel. Ash's voice was calm but commanding through comms, guiding, directing. Left flank, cover the wounded, keep low. The patrol adjusted, moving in a staggered formation. Ash remained on the ridge, every sense attuned to the subtle shifts in light, the murmurs of wind over stone, the faintest click of a bolt sliding. Every movement below, every blink from the boy, every twitch of the enemy was a note in a symphony of tension she conducted alone. Then movement from the far ridge, reinforcements she hadn't seen. Shadows emerging slowly, carefully, deliberately. Not immediate threat, but potential. Ash's scope tracked, calculating trajectory, distance, wind, angle. Every breath she took measured, every heartbeat weighed against the lives she had promised to safeguard. The boy stumbled, catching himself against a fallen crate. Ash's heart clenched, not out of fear for herself, but for him. She had seen too many children in war, their small bodies folded under violence, eyes wide with questions no one would answer. She would not let him be one of them. A gust of wind carried a scent of smoke from the damaged chopper. Ash noted the direction, speed, and angle. Dust swirled around the rotor blades, making a dangerous illusion of safety. The pilot's skill was visible, but she knew instinctively that every second counted. Extraction could fail if they didn't move precisely now. Her calm crackled, The captain's voice was strained, urgent. "Ash, they're moving toward the hatch. Cover fire is getting thin." Ash exhaled slowly, weighing options. The enemy was regrouping, the patrol advancing, the child navigating chaos instinctively. The chopper's engines groaned, struggling with the weight, with the uneven terrain. She had seconds to act, not to hesitate. Her rifle moved with the rhythm of training and instinct, each shot precise, calculated disruption rather than elimination. One man fell behind a crate, stunned but not fatally injured. Another staggered back, clutching his shoulder. The rest ducked, regrouping. Her presence, invisible but decisive, kept them contained. The boy moved closer to the wounded, his small hands brushing dirt and blood, instinctively assisting, learning the rhythm of survival through observation. Ash's chest ached, not from exertion but from recognition. She had once been like him, small, determined, unaware of the weight the world could place on innocence. The chopper descended slowly, rotors whipping up dust and debris. Soldiers scrambled to stabilize the boy and the wounded, lifting them toward the rope ladder. Ash's scope tracked every movement, ready to intercede if any threat emerged from the compound ruins or far ridge. Then a figure appeared from the rubble, a man she hadn't marked before, limping, weapon lowered but intent sharp. Ash's mind calculated. Angle, range, potential trajectory if he reached the patrol. Every instinct screamed threat. She fired, not to kill but to disable. The round struck the ground near his foot, sending dust and gravel toward him, forcing him to stagger backward. His eyes narrowed, understanding that someone unseen controlled the environment, and he retreated, dragging himself into cover. The patrol reached the chopper, guiding the boy and the wounded. Ash watched every moment, ensuring they were lifted safely, every motion accounted for. The pilot adjusted, ropes secured, engines fighting balance. The valley held its breath. Dust, debris, the echo of gunfire, all suspended in a tense pause. Ash remained on the ridge, lone sentinel, ensuring extraction proceeded without fatal interruption. Her comm crackled. The captain's voice was distant yet relieved. "Ash, we're clear. Everyone's on board." She exhaled fully, the first true release since the ambush began. Muscles relaxed minutely, but her mind stayed sharp. The valley was not yet safe. Shadows lingered, dust stirred, potential threats remained. She couldn't afford complacency. The chopper lifted, engines straining, carrying life out of the immediate danger. The patrol and the boy were secure, for now. But the consequences of the mission, of decisions made in split seconds, remained. Ash's gaze swept the valley, ensuring no threat remained immediate, no movement unnoticed. She thought of her brother again, of the promise she had whispered in the silence of previous missions. To protect, to act decisively, to bear the weight of choice without expectation of recognition. The boy had survived today not because of luck, but because she had balanced instinct with calculation, heart with reason. As the chopper disappeared over the ridge, Ash finally allowed herself to breathe, slowly, deeply, the valley settling around her like a reluctant witness. Dust drifted, echoing faintly with the remnants of chaos, but for the first time she felt the quiet promise of continuation. The boy would live, the patrol would live, and she remained the silent observer, the unseen guardian, the one who acted when words were insufficient. Sometimes, she thought, survival was not about victory or defeat. It was about presence, about restraint, about the careful orchestration of decisions in moments when the world demanded more than human strength. It demanded judgment, heart, and silent courage. Ash exhaled once more, lowering her rifle, surveying the valley one last time before retreating along a path she had already chosen in her mind. The mountains swallowed her figure, dust and echoes, leaving the scene quiet but not forgotten, still tense with the lessons of war and the quiet strength of one who had chosen to act when necessary. She moved down the ridge, slow, deliberate, every step a testament to endurance, vigilance, and silent resilience. The valley behind her would remember, even if no one would record it, the presence of someone who had risen from the ruins, not just surviving, but choosing how to act when survival itself was a negotiation with chaos. And in the wind through the rocks, carrying the scent of smoke and earth, she heard something faint, a whisper almost lost. The lesson she had learned, the moral she had always carried. Sometimes courage is quiet. Sometimes dignity acts and words need not follow. Ash continued her path, leaving the valley behind but carrying every weight, every memory, every echo with her, not as burden but as testament. Ash moved through the valley as shadows stretched long with the sinking sun. Dust still clung to her uniform, grit embedded in every seam, every crease, a reminder of the hours spent on the ridge. Her body ached, muscles protesting, but her mind was sharp, alert. Survival didn't end when the immediate threat lifted. It lingered, a quiet pressure that demanded vigilance, reflection, and careful calculation of every next step. The patrol had moved on ahead, the chopper carrying the boy and the wounded toward safety. Their voices faded behind her, replaced by the soft wind whispering through jagged rocks and the occasional cry of a bird disturbed by the battle's residue. Ash paused on a ridge, scanning the valley below. She noted the positions of fallen enemies, the remnants of supplies scattered across dust and debris. Nothing moved, yet she didn't trust it. The calm was only a temporary lull, a pocket of stillness in a world built on chaos. Her thoughts drifted to the boy. He had survived today not because of luck, but because of instinct, training, and perhaps something more, resilience born of necessity. She imagined him on the chopper, gripping the rope ladder, looking down at the valley he would never forget. His eyes, wide and steady in moments of terror, had mirrored something she had carried for years, the quiet awareness that life demanded choices no one else could make for you. Ash adjusted her pack, feeling the weight of ammunition, water, and the essentials of survival pressing against her back. She moved with measured steps down a narrow path carved into the rock, every motion deliberate, calculated to minimize sound. The valley remained silent, but the memory of gunfire and screams lingered like a shadow she could not shake. Her mind wandered to the past, the missions that had led her here, each scar and loss layering upon the next. She remembered the first time she had lost someone under her watch, the helplessness that had clawed at her chest, the bitter taste of regret that lingered far longer than any wound. She had promised herself then that every decision would be precise, every action intentional, every life she could protect would matter. Today had been a testament to that promise. A distant noise drew her attention, a faint rustling barely audible over the wind. She froze, listening. Her hand instinctively went to her rifle, scanning the surrounding ridges. Shadows shifted among the rocks, not enemies, not immediately, but the tension in the air was familiar. Instinct told her to proceed with caution. She moved slowly, eyes scanning, mind calculating. Every step was measured, every shadow assessed. Her breathing remained steady, controlled, a rhythm she had mastered over countless missions. She had learned long ago that panic was a luxury no operative could afford. The sun dipped lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the valley. The light caught on a jagged rock, reflecting like a signal. Ash's scope moved instinctively, tracking the reflection. Nothing, just the play of sunlight on stone, but her mind couldn't ignore it. In war, every detail mattered. Every reflection, every shadow, every sound could be the difference between life and death. She reached a small plateau, the view opening to the valley she had left behind. The destruction was evident, the remnants of battle scattered across the terrain, dust rising in slow spirals from disturbed earth. Ash crouched, taking in the scene. The patrol had successfully extracted the boy and the wounded. That much was certain. But the valley still held secrets, remnants of those who had orchestrated the chaos. Her calm crackled faintly. The captain's voice filtered through, calm now but tinged with exhaustion. Ash status. Clear for now, she replied, her voice low, steady. Patrol and extraction accounted for. Valley appears stable. Good, move to rendezvous point, he instructed. She acknowledged silently. moving along a narrow ledge that would provide cover from any potential surveillance or pursuit. Her boots crunched softly against the gravel, each step a careful negotiation with gravity and terrain. As she moved, memories resurfaced, faces of fallen comrades, moments of hesitation, times she had acted decisively, and times regret had haunted her nights. The weight of responsibility never left. It was a companion she carried, silent and relentless. Ahead the path narrowed further, forcing her to hug the rock face. She paused, listening. The wind had died down, leaving only the faint rustle of distant wildlife. Ash's eyes scanned constantly, aware that even in apparent quiet, danger could lurk. Her thoughts shifted to the boy again. He was young, resilient, and yet exposed to a world of violence far beyond his years. She had guided him through the immediate threat, but the lessons of survival extended beyond this valley. She hoped quietly that he would carry today's experience not as trauma, but as a foundation for resilience. Movement to her left, a small rock skittering downward, caught her attention. She froze, rifle ready. A shadow moved between rocks, cautious, deliberate. She held her breath, analyzing. Not an enemy, not yet. A civilian, likely drawn by curiosity or necessity. Ash assessed. Pose non-threatening, no weapons, likely seeking safety or escape from the valley's chaos. She stepped carefully aside, giving space, letting instinct and observation guide her actions. Her presence remained unseen, the shadow passing without incident. Every decision measured, every movement intentional. The path opened into a narrow gorge, flanked by steep cliffs. She scanned the terrain, noting potential cover, escape routes, vantage points. The landscape was unforgiving, but she had learned to navigate it, to move as if part of the rock and dust itself. Her calm crackled again. Ash estimated time to rendezvous. 15 minutes, she replied. Her voice calm, steady, even as every muscle in her body remained primed for action. The sun touched the horizon, casting the valley in golden hues that belied the violence that had occurred hours earlier. Shadows lengthened, and the cool evening air began to settle. Ash moved with purpose, knowing the extraction point was near, the patrol waiting, and the boy secure for now. Memories of her family surfaced, fleeting, distant. She had chosen this path, chosen to bear responsibility in silence, and yet moments like this reminded her of the human cost, what was gained, and what was inevitably left behind. The gorge opened to a small plateau where the rendezvous point awaited. The patrol was visible now, motioning her forward. She assessed the surroundings one last time, ensuring no threats remained in the immediate area. As she approached, the boy looked up, recognition passing through his eyes once more. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. Actions had spoken for them both. The captain met her at the plateau, nodding. All accounted for. Yes, Ash replied simply. They moved together toward the extraction zone. The sun dipped fully below the horizon, shadows stretching long and thin. Ash's eyes remained vigilant, scanning, aware that even as immediate danger receded, the valley's silence could hide threats still. She reflected silently. Survival was never guaranteed. It was earned moment by moment, decision by decision. The boy's life, the patrol's safety, they were products of careful calculation, instinct, and relentless vigilance. As the chopper approached the plateau, rotor blades cutting the air, Ash took her final scan of the valley. Dust swirled, shadows shifted, but no immediate threat remained. The extraction was complete. The lesson, however, lingered. Every action, every restraint, every calculated risk carried weight far beyond the moment. The boy ascended the rope ladder first, then the wounded, followed by the patrol. Ash remained for the final scan, ensuring nothing was left behind. Finally she exhaled, lowering her rifle. The valley receded beneath her, the dust settling, the echoes fading. She moved toward the rope ladder, muscles stiff but steady. Sometimes, she thought, courage was silent. Sometimes dignity didn't speak, it acted. Ash climbed last onto the chopper, allowing herself a slow, measured breath. The valley below shrank, a testament to the chaos, survival, and quiet strength that had persisted through every decision made in the shadows. She had acted, she had protected, she had survived, and for now that was enough. The chopper lifted off, the valley shrinking beneath its rotors, dust and debris swirling like memories too stubborn to settle. Ash sat near the edge, rifle resting against her knee, eyes scanning the horizon even as the mountains receded. The boy sat across from her, quiet now, still absorbing what survival had demanded of him today. No words passed, none were needed. Actions had spoken with precision, silence carrying lessons louder than any voice. The wind from the rotor whipped at her face, carrying the scent of smoke, earth, and lingering dust from the valley below. Every inhalation reminded her that life was fragile, fleeting, precious, yet always fragile under pressure. She thought of the patrol, each soldier's exhaustion, each small victory in this violent chessboard. She thought of the child, resilient despite exposure to chaos, embodying the impossible balance of innocence and awareness. Ash's mind drifted back to the first mission that had truly marked her, the night of Helmand, the screams, the dust, the cries of children trapped where adults had failed. She remembered the quiet resolve that had filled her, even as loss filled the air. It had been then she realized that courage wasn't loud. It wasn't celebrated. It simply acted silently, decisively, without expectation of praise. The boy shifted, glancing at her with wide eyes that carried more than curiosity. There was a question there, unspoken, heavy with the weight of everything he had witnessed. Ash met his gaze, letting her eyes convey what words could not. She wanted him to understand. Survival was not about heroics. It was about choices, restraint, awareness, and the silent strength to act when necessary. The chopper banked over a ridge, the valley now a tapestry of dust, shadows, and memories of battle. Ash's ears picked up the faint hum of rotors, the distant echo of soldiers moving below, and the subtle groan of metal settling in fatigue. Even here, far from the immediate danger, vigilance remained a companion. One could never fully leave the weight of war behind. Her thoughts returned to the device she had neutralized. Small, lethal, and overlooked by most, but a reminder that danger often hid in details in the overlooked. The boy had instinctively moved it out of harm's way, demonstrating that even in youth, instinct could learn quickly under the right guidance. Ash allowed herself a brief, silent nod of approval. Resilience could be nurtured, even in the young, if tempered by experience and quiet leadership. The patrol had now gathered near the chopper, tending to the wounded, giving each other silent acknowledgments. No words of praise, no medals or accolades, just the quiet understanding that they had survived, that they had acted decisively, and that their lives had been preserved through discipline, skill, and instinct. Ash's eyes scanned each face, nodding exhaustion, relief, and a subtle light of pride tempered by the weight of what they had endured. Below, the valley remained, silent now but scarred. Dust settled over the remnants of the compound, the scattered equipment, and the echoes of what had been, destruction and survival intertwined. Ash felt the weight of it all not as guilt but as understanding. Every action, every choice, every decision had consequences, some visible, some hidden. Today, the balance had tipped in favor of life. That alone was a victory. The boy leaned forward slightly, curiosity mixed with the awareness that Ash had long carried. Life demanded decisions that were uncomfortable, burdens that could not be shared, and courage that often went unnoticed. He reached toward her bag, fingers brushing her gear, and she allowed it. Connection, however brief, mattered. Guidance mattered. The transfer of understanding, even silent, was crucial. Ash's thoughts returned to her own past, the faces of those she had lost, the promises made, the lessons learned in silence. Each memory was a teacher, each scar a reminder, each choice a measure of morality in the chaos of conflict. She had risen from the ruins before, in ways both literal and metaphorical, and each time she had discovered that survival alone was insufficient. One must act with judgment, with restraint, and with the quiet strength to do what was necessary. The chopper banked again, sunlight glinting off distant peaks, painting shadows across the terrain. Ash allowed herself a rare, slow exhale, muscles relaxing just slightly. The valley below, though scarred, would endure. The boy, though exposed to horrors too early, would endure. And she, silent sentinel, would continue to act when necessary, as she always had. She glanced around the cabin, noting the patrol's careful attention to each other and the wounded. There was no boasting, no heroics, only quiet competence. Each life preserved today was testimony to discipline, to observation, to silent courage. Ash reflected. Victories in war were often invisible, fleeting, recognized only in moments like this, in the subtle relief in someone's eyes, in the absence of what might have been. Her gaze returned to the boy. He was quiet, hands folded in his lap, eyes distant but focused. She saw questions forming, tentative but inevitable. He would ask them eventually: why, how, what? And she knew her answers would not be immediate. Some lessons, like courage, like resilience, unfolded in their own time. She would guide silently, watching, ready to intervene when necessary, allowing him to learn the weight of choice and consequence at his own pace. The valley disappeared beneath the horizon, replaced by the broader landscape of mountains, rivers, and distant settlements. Ash remained vigilant, observing, calculating, absorbing. Even as the immediate danger passed, she knew that the world beyond held further challenges, unseen threats, and consequences yet to unfold. Survival required more than skill. It required attention, presence, and the quiet discipline to act without hesitation. The chopper descended toward a forward base, the engines vibrating with effort. Soldiers moved with efficiency, tending to the wounded, assisting the boy, maintaining vigilance. Ash felt the subtle relief of completion, the rare satisfaction of a mission executed without unnecessary loss, without avoidable errors. Yet she remained alert, aware that the end of one engagement was only the beginning of the next. The boy's eyes met hers once more, and she allowed herself a small, unspoken acknowledgement. No words were exchanged, but the understanding was clear. Survival was not just about avoiding harm. It was about acting decisively, wisely, and with courage, even in silence. As the chopper touched down, the patrol disembarked, assisting the boy and the wounded onto secure ground. Ash remained momentarily in place, scanning the horizon one final time, noting the lingering shadows, the dust settling over the valley, and the quiet aftermath of chaos. She descended last, rifle at her side, movements deliberate and controlled. The base greeted them without ceremony, only the quiet, disciplined coordination of soldiers who understood that today's survival was both victory and responsibility. The boy was guided toward medical assessment, his eyes occasionally meeting Ash. In those brief moments, understanding passed between them. Courage, survival, and resilience were not taught with words alone. They were demonstrated, chosen, and enacted silently, decisively. Ash moved to the edge of the base, observing, reflecting. Her mind replayed the valley, the ridge, the compound, the choices, the calculations, the lives preserved. Every moment had been a measure of judgment, instinct, and quiet strength. She realized again that rising from ruins was not merely surviving. It was choosing to act, to protect, to endure, and to carry the lessons forward without expectation of recognition. The sun fully set, casting long shadows over the base and surrounding mountains. Ash lowered her rifle, allowing herself the slightest relief. She had acted, she had protected, she had survived, and though the world beyond awaited, for now there was quiet. The boy, guided safely into the base, glanced back once more, a question lingering in his gaze. Ash nodded subtly, the silent acknowledgement of a lesson shared without words. Courage is not loud, resilience is not proclaimed, and dignity does not speak, it acts. Ash stood alone for a moment, absorbing the wind, the fading light, the echoes of what had transpired. The valley would remember, even if silently. The lesson of today would endure, not in stories told, but in choices made, in lives preserved, in the quiet strength of one who had risen from the ruins. She exhaled slowly, the weight of the day settling into her bones, the quiet satisfaction of action completed, responsibility fulfilled. In the stillness of twilight, Ash realized that survival was more than breathing. It was decision. It was action. It was the courage to stand unbroken amidst the ruins. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Ash turned, walking toward the base, her silhouette merging with the darkness, a figure of silent resilience, carrying lessons learned, lives protected, and the quiet strength that comes from rising, again and again, from the ruins.